Good afternoon, grade 11s. Welcome to today's LO lesson. My name is Bulen Liziga, and I am your LO teacher for the duration of the lockdown. On the screen are my contact details. I've got there for you my email address. It is lizigapuleng@yahoo.com. So Liziga is my surname, Puleng is my name in small letters, and then it is at yahoo.com. So that's where you can contact me with any of your questions about LOs or anything with regards to LO. You're welcome to contact me on that address. So today we're doing chapter 11, unit 4, the impact of unsafe practices on self and others, and individual responsibility for making informed decisions. The impact of unsafe practices on self and others, and individual responsibility for making informed decisions. So the lesson objectives for today will be know the impact of unsafe practices on self and others, and individual responsibility for making informed decisions and choices. So all right, sorry for that. We're going to move on to the next slide where we're going to start the lesson. Impact of unsafe practices on self and others, and individual responsibility for making informed decisions and choices. So this is about the decisions that you make in your life and how they will impact on yourself and how they're going to impact on others too. So we're going to start with the emotional effects. So emotions is all about how you feel. So consequences of risky behaviors include emotional trauma. So emotional trauma is maybe you go out, you go driving without a driver's license, and then you get a car accident. So what happens then is that you'll get an emotional trauma. You'll get traumatized, you'll get flashbacks maybe, and that would be as a consequence of the trauma, of the accident that you've done, of the risky behavior that you have involved yourself in. So the abuse of alcohol and other substances cause mood changes. So as you know that alcohol and other substances, they cause like your brain to react differently. So your mood after you drink alcohol and you use drugs and other substances changes completely. Your attitude, your personality may change. If you're usually a happy person, you might become a very angry or aggressive person. So substances do change your mood. a lot of the places where this gender-based violence is basically is caused by alcohol and drug abuse. Men and women too behave very differently when they're under the influence of substances. A lot of them will start beating their women up. A lot of them will start beating, let's say, their partners up, and then they'll also abuse their children and their family members. So it does change the behavior of people. And then it's also it causes it causes crime, because some crimes when they're committed, people take drugs first and take alcohol first, and then they commit these crimes. So basically what happens is also that some crimes are committed to pay for the drugs. So you find that when someone is hooked onto the drug, what they do is that they start doing crime in order to maintain to get their next fix. In order for them to get their next round of drugs, then they have to commit another crime, or they're used by drug lords to commit other crimes, and then they pay them with drugs. So those are risky behaviors. Risky behaviors and then the economic effects. Risky behaviors affect the economics of a country as well as the situation of the individual involved. So, early parenthood is likely also to affect educational achievement with the dropout rates of pregnant teenagers. This has negative impacts on future employment possibilities. So risky behavior does affect the economics of a country. For instance, we have a problem in our country with crime. So people committing crime means it's less and less safe for other companies from outside to come and invest in our country. So that costs us as an economy, because when people don't want to invest in our economy, then we don't get people to employment doesn't get created, and no one helps our economy to grow and our country won't develop. Also, with regards to people coming to the country, then the tourism industry suffers. So there are cases like that where you find that risky behavior does affect the economics of our country. Also, it affects individuals. For instance, if someone gets robbed of their car or someone gets defrauded of their money, then the person, because they are set back and they have to work back for the things that they have, then they are able to work back for the things that they have. So this is basically what happens. They're able to work back for the things that they have. Every parenthood is likely to be affected economically, because afterwards. So what happens is you lose out on school, you aren't able to complete your studies, and then you aren't able to get a job, or to get a job that pays well. And then what happens also is that now you cannot provide safety continues. But then what happens is nowadays some communities do now have gotten rid of that taboo, and we are able to go back to school and we are able to provide for our children. So again, it also impacts the economy when women and girls can't go back to school because they dropped out when they got pregnant. So it means that less women in the working place. This has a negative impact on future employment and possibilities for the young people too. So in the workplace, this is the second bullet point. In the workplace, drug abusers have shown more incidents of absenteeism accidents on the job, medical aid claims, and lost productivity than non-users. So what happens is when people are abusing drugs and substances, they tend not to go to work, maybe on Mondays. Some of them leave early on Fridays so that they can have long weekends. So that means they are often absent from work, and then that causes the company to lose money because basically the productivity is low. Companies work according to hours, so they know that within 1 hour they will have maybe produced a certain number of products and will get a certain amount of revenue from those products. So if there's less products being made because someone along the assembly line is not there, then it means they're losing out on money. So absenteeism does affect uh, companies' productions, and therefore does affect the economy. Also, it also affects your competency at work. For people that go to work drunk or that drink on the job, you aren't able to work properly when you're drunk. You won't be able to maybe do your work or complete your targets on time or meet your goals and meet your deadlines because you're not sober enough to do so. And then the medical claims too. In some firms and some companies, you're dealing with machinery and you're dealing with dangerous chemicals. So when you're drunk, you aren't able to meet with the safety requirements. You might find that you're a bit clumsy, and then you might have to cause a medical emergency on the job. So that will mean that the company has to make more medical claims. And then loss of productivity, like we said, that you can't work well whilst you are drunk or on a substance. Many individuals in the low income group often spend money on tobacco, alcohol, or drugs instead of food, clothing, and shelter. So, what happens is a lot of people who spend money trying to get their next fix or hooked on substances, maybe they're addicted. What happens is that they tend to spend money trying to get their next fix and trying to smoke their next cigarettes instead of spending money on basic services, for instance, like paying for their homes. Many people lose their homes, and maybe paying for food. Children go to school without eating when parents are substance abusers, and children don't have clothes. Even them themselves are not able to clothe themselves. So, with no food, no clothing, no shelter, they basically aren't able to cover the basic needs. So that is a risky behavior. And then political effects. Governmental funds are strained by the need to provide services to deal with the physical and emotional effects of risky behaviors. Equipping clinics with staff and medical supplies is costly. So, how the government is strained is that, let's say there are lots of accidents on the road caused by alcohol and drugs and maybe reckless driving. Maybe you don't have a driver's license, you're driving underage, you aren't trained well. So that causes lots of car accidents. And what happens, how this impacts on the government is that the government has a fund called the Road Accident Fund, and it pays out for people who are injured. So there will be a lot of payouts. So there'll be a lot of money allocated to paying out for car accidents that could be avoided, and that money could be used in other areas. So also money spent on taking care of crime and the justice system. If there was less crime in the streets or on the roads, then the government wouldn't have to spend so much time paying for safety and staff. So equipping clinics with staff and medical supplies. Our emergency rooms constantly need to be upgraded with emergency supplies because we do have a lot of emergency cases, especially because of alcohol and drug abuse and reckless behavior. So what we've seen now because of COVID-19, that they've banned alcohol and cigarettes. So what stats says that since they've banned alcohol and cigarettes and other substance users, what they've seen is that there are less emergency cases at hospitals. So meaning there are less people coming in with stab wounds, etc., and maybe gunshot wounds. So what happens is that doctors and nurses are now able to shift their work to more serious cases instead of dealing with stitching people who are maybe stabbed. They can now focus on the serious cases. So if we could get rid of the risky behavior maybe of drinking alcohol and abusing drugs, then what we could do is we could save the government from investing so much in clinics and in medical supplies. Not that it's not good to invest in those things, but if we have to because people are being reckless or behaving in a risky manner, then it means we could do more maybe for people who are in ICU and maybe people with more serious cases like cancer. Elections are often fought, this is the second bullet point. Elections are often fought on service delivery, which includes basic medical services to the public. This comes at a great cost to the taxpayers who sometimes believe that the money could be better spent. So what happens is if they if you take part in risky behaviors, for instance, teenage pregnancy could be one, where you find that there's no family planning and a lot of young people are having kids, but they're not yet responsible to, are not yet able to take care of the children that they have. So what happens is now they become a burden to the state that they need a fund now. They need a social grant. Yes, that's the word that I'm looking for. They need social grants to take care of their needs. So now they social grants for people who could have gone to school and who could have maybe been able to take care of themselves. So, and this is where the complaints come in from taxpayers that maybe the money that is spent on paying out social grants could be the money that should be spent on infrastructure and maybe economical development and just making sure that everybody gets basic services like water, sanitation, waste removal, and electricity, stuff like that. And then we've come to the slide, the environmental effects. So unsafe practices negatively affect the environment when those manufacturing the drugs consumed by youth turn to growing plants for this use instead of food for people. Forests are cleared in order to grow the plants used, and there is often some form of toxic waste from the manufacturing process. So what happens here is that where food is normally planted, where maybe your crops are planted, whatever food, whether it's fruits, vegetables, or staple food is planted, then those plants get replaced with maybe marijuana plants and other plants that are used for making drugs or as ingredients for making drugs. So what happens is that there's less food and this impacts um for impacts negatively on food security and food supplies. So if we plant less food, then it means we have less food for us to go around the community. So what happens is forests are also cleared in order to grow the plants used, and there is often some form of toxic waste. So there is some waste maybe that gets thrown into some areas and into some rivers from the manufacturing process. And as you know, whenever you remove plants and whenever you remove natural vegetation, then it's also an environmental hazard. So the animals that were living there, the plants that were growing there originally, lose their natural habitat. Individual responsibility for making informed decisions and choices. You take responsibility for yourself when you make informed decisions backed by knowledge and by making sure that your choice fits in with your values. So basically, it is your decision, the kinds of decisions that you make, whether they're negative or whether they're positive, they will all impact on you. So what you must do is you must make the correct choices so that they can impact on your life positively. You want to make the correct choices so that you can do well as a person, because successful people are people who have made good choices in their lives. So the lesson was short today, so that is it for today. Basically, we will be continuing tomorrow with the lesson, and please join me tomorrow for the lesson at 3 o'clock, and we will be continuing. We'll be doing chapter 13. We'll be doing chapter 13 tomorrow. And thank you for being in the class with me today. For more information, please contact Africa Teen Gigs and follow us on social media at Africa Teen Gigs. So yes, you can also go to my email. Here's the slide with my email, lizikapuleng@yahoo.com. So I don't know if anybody has a question. Does anybody have a question? Okay. See you tomorrow then. See you tomorrow at 3 o'clock. Thank you.